Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Inside Canes Recruiting, our regular look at the recruiting efforts of the Miami Hurricanes. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined today by our two recruiting experts, Stephen Wagner and Luke Chaney. And guys, this is a massive, massive weekend. You know, I was taking a look at this Broward County High School National Football Showcase, and it's really grown through the years, and it's so impressive what these folks in Broward County are able to put together with a series of games to open the high school football season. We're expecting to see at least 20 Miami recruits, commits, or prospects in this weekend showcase. It started Thursday night with the Cardinal Gibbons Archbishop McCarthy game, and also Jacksonville Bowl Schools contest against Coconut Creek Monarch. And there's going to be a whole lot more here in between that I want to talk a little bit about on today's show. But Luke, let me start out with you. You were out there last night at the Bulls Monarch game, and you had a chance to take a look at J.J. Sparks, an interior offensive line commit for the Hurricanes, a guy that they're projecting as a potential center of the future. Why don't we start out with your thoughts on just what you saw from J.J. Sparks?
Yeah, and first off, before I get into JJ, I want to give a quick shout out to the old stomping grounds at Archbishop McCarthy. It's where I went to high school, picked up a big time win over Cardinal Gibbons. So just want to give a quick shout out to them. But yeah, no, JJ, first time seeing him live, since he committed to Miami, of course, in the spring. And I was impressed. In the run game, I thought, he got off the line pretty quickly, showed good physicality, really, kind of showed that extra edge that you like to see from linemen, played with a bunch of physicality, played after the whistle, which you always like to see. And he's just a hard worker. He puts his head down, competes on every play, played left guard. And he mentioned, when speaking to him after the game that he's going to play some left guard, or he's going to play inside a little bit. He's going to play some center this year for Bulls. Going to be moved around a bit, which is good. You want to see your offensive linemen, have the ability to play multiple positions along the offensive line. And yeah, overall, I walked away pretty impressed. He really wasn't challenged much on, in pass protection, but at least in the run game, I thought he played very well. He had multiple pancakes. There was this one play in particular where he sends, albeit a much smaller defender, just completely airborne, feet off the ground sort of thing. So yeah, it was a pretty solid performance. He graded it pretty well after the game. And next week, I think they play against Trinity Catholic. So see if he can, continue this good start to the season.
And like I said, Miami really likes him as a center candidate. They're really putting together one heck of an offensive line class this year. And Stephen, let's start there with you. Offensive line, huge focus this year in this cycle with Miami. And, we were just talking about Sparks, but how do you feel the whole offensive line thing is coming together for Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal?
Yeah, I think this is probably pretty close to the finished product that we're going to see. Miami has 6 offensive linemen committed right now. We know they're still communicating with USC commits Kenai Pepe and Brett Koloje. Koloje, some of you guys might remember, Miami was a finalist for him whenever he committed to USC earlier this month. The Hurricanes were really, really, really involved. I mean, right up until the final second, they really were right there. Right now, I don't know if he's going to be able to get down to a game or not, but Miami is absolutely continuing to very aggressively shoot their shot with his camp. I've already had that confirmed to me. But like I said, I do think this is probably pretty close to the finished product that we're going to see. And, top to bottom, even without Koloje, this is still a really, really good offensive line class. You've got the number 1 player in America in Jackson Cantwell. You have a 4-star offensive tackle with really tremendous upside, albeit a little bit raw, in Ben Collington. And then you have a guy who I think is going to be an absolute wrecking ball, and a guy that we have very consistently heard Miami just absolutely loves, in Joel Irvin. And then on top of that, you add guys like Cannon Pickett, who is definitely going to have the opportunity to compete for a starting spot while he's at Miami. And then 2 interior linemen in J.J. Sparks and Reese Woodrow. I mean, this really does check just about every box that you wanted to see that you wanted to see Miami check in this year's offensive line class, considering what they're going to be losing. Obviously, Miami is going to have to depend on some true freshmen in spots next year. They'll probably, maybe have to hit the transfer portal to get, maybe like one guy here or one guy there. But Miami wants to make, a very, very clear and concerted effort to go aggressively, or to focus very aggressively on the offensive line in this year's high school class. And this really is a great year, top to bottom, to focus on the offensive line. This is, I think really the deepest offensive line class we've seen as a whole nationally since, honestly, the 2023 cycle, when Miami signed Francis Mauigoa and Samson Okinola and the bulk of basically the last major offensive line first class that we've seen Mario Cristobal go after. I think that this probably collectively is going to end up being around like an A- level class. It could potentially be an A if Miami ends up deciding that they want to add one more guy, but right now I think this is a pretty good group.
All right, since we've ventured into the land of the reallys, I'm really impressed with the lineup of games this weekend. Let me just run through some of them for everybody. Games, Friday games. You got West Broward playing Draper, Utah, Corner Canyon. You got American Heritage playing Philadelphia St. Joe's Prep in a 6:00 ESPN2 matchup. And then Saturday, you've got St. Thomas playing Mater Dei from California, who many think might be the best team in the country. And then you've also got Chaminade playing Baltimore St. Francis, another marquee game. So these are like cross-national, big-time high school football games that they've been able to bring to Broward County to start out the season. And Stephen, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the players that if people decide they want to go out and watch, or obviously be monitoring our coverage of all this, what are some of the other names that you anticipate people looking for here in the Broward Showcase?
Yeah, this collectively, top to bottom, probably is the most loaded Broward Showcase that I've seen since I've been working here. I know there were quite a few dudes in 2024, but man, this year, top to bottom, it is just absolutely stacked. I guess a couple of guys that I'm really going to be looking at over at St. Thomas whenever they play tomorrow, going to definitely be Mark Matthews, the number 2 overall prospect in the 2027 class, Justice Fitzpatrick, the 2026 cornerback committed to Georgia, who is still a top mega priority for Miami in this year's cycle. Julius Jones, the 2027 wide receiver, he's going to be another major priority for Miami. Derek Cooper is going to be back in action. We've talked so freaking much about Derek Cooper on this show. Jason Lopez as well, the top slot receiver. And it kind of hit me whenever I was, sort of writing the preview, just how important Jason Lopez really is. Mario Cristobal has not lost a recruiting battle with Florida State at Chaminade since he has been the head coach at Miami. You think he's going to be a little extra motivated to make sure that he keeps Jason Lopez home, that he flips him from Florida State, and he continues that streak? He cares about that for his reputation. He wants it to be known. Yeah, Florida State and Florida are not going to be able to come down here and just poach guys that we want to have. I know obviously, Jeremiah Smith a couple years ago, they really want him, but he went to Ohio State. He didn't go to Florida State. Zaquan Patterson, Miami was battling FSU for him. Miami beat out FSU. Miami was battling FSU for Chris Ewald. Miami beat out FSU for Chris Ewald. They are really going to bust their ass to make sure that they are able to keep Jason Lopez home. A couple other guys that we're going to be keeping an eye on. Like you said, JJ Sparks, we already saw him. Kamani Morales over at American Heritage, the linebacker. So he doesn't hold a Miami offer right now, but we do know Miami is continuing to monitor him. They are in touch with him. He is going to be at the Miami Notre Dame game at the end of the month. I think that he could potentially end up picking up an offer if he plays really, really well. Right now, Miami's kind of, keeping their options open as far as linebackers go. They only have one real true linebacker committed in JJ Edwards, considering that Jordan Campbell's probably going to be more like a jack, stand-up edge type of player at the college level. So if Kamani Morales plays really well, I could totally see him getting an offer and Miami trying to make an effort for him, but they are just keeping tabs on him for now. I already mentioned all the STA talent. Amari Nugent over at American Heritage, kind of a big, stocky, but I think, really talented defensive back who's a 4-star prospect who is, drawing a decent amount of interest from Miami early on. American Heritage has obviously, produced quite a few defensive backs over the years that have ended up at Miami. James Williams, Damari Brown, Xavier Lucas. Now, Amari Nugent comes in. We'll see if he ends up a Hurricane, but he is going to be at the Miami Notre Dame game as well. Zayden Gamble at St. Thomas, another guy we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on, and Jaden Carey. One guy I'm kind of interested to see tonight actually is going to be Charlie Folk. He's a 3-star quarterback for St. Joe's Prep. He's going to be on the other side of the American Heritage game. So he was offered by Miami back in the spring, but as we've documented very thoroughly on the site, Miami is all in on trying to get Trent Seaborn in this year's class. Right now, I am not hyper confident about Miami's chances with Seaborn. The Hurricanes are absolutely still in the mix. They very much still are a contender. But quite frankly, I think at this point, if we really were going to start feeling like Trent Seaborn was going to end up at Miami, I think we'd probably be hearing a little bit more pro-Miami buzz for Seaborn. So if the Hurricanes don't get him and they don't get Peyton Houston, which it's looking like they probably won't, just because I don't think the mutual interest is quite there, I could see them maybe checking out a Charlie Folk, circling back around and seeing if checking out some of these kind of pro-style quarterbacks with good touch and pretty good accuracy who are kind of, the Shannon Dawson prototype, guys who are kind of similar-ish to Luke Nickel. So I could totally see Miami trying to check out Charlie Folk, especially if he plays really well. And then, just a couple of really quick 2028 talents. Amir Sears over at West Broward, he's going to be in that Corner Canyon game that Luke's going to be at. And then Aiden Johnson too. I know West Broward hasn't exactly been known as a football a talent-rich football school for Miami, or a school that Miami's tried to have a really strong recruiting presence at, but they're actually starting to amass some pretty eye-opening talent, and some talent in that 2028 class that I think whenever their time comes, if they stay at West Broward, I mean, heck, I don't think it's out of the picture to think that West Broward's going to have enough talent on that team to win a state championship. So really excited to see a lot of really top prospects over this weekend. And like I said, I mean, this is the most loaded that it's been since I've been here.
Yeah, they're doing a nice job over there at West Broward. I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, but they're doing a really good job of just improving their football program and putting out some good players. All right, earlier this week, Miami got a commitment from Demarcus Ro, a really impressive-looking athlete at Cardinal Gibbons. Steven, somehow the season's just beginning, and he got a concussion, I guess, in practice or something, and didn't get to play in the opener, but you did get a chance to speak to him. What's the vibe right now with DeRoche?
Yeah, so DeRoche is very solid with Miami, but he is still open. There are other schools that are going to make runs at him. NC State was the other school that he said was like really heavily involved with him. leading up to his commitment. Keep in mind, this is a guy who, he earned his 4-star ranking, relatively recently. And so Miami and NC State were really the schools that were having the communication with him, whenever he was still a relatively unknown prospect. NC State stayed pretty consistent with him, but right now Miami absolutely is the team to beat. And I think it's going to be pretty hard for another school to beat Miami out. Right now, he doesn't have any other visits planned to other schools except Miami. I obviously expect that to change. He is a 2027 prospect, so there is more than a year left until his own signing day. And Miami has shown, whenever a player commits, more than a year out, they're totally fine with that player going out and taking visits. They understand, this is just kind of the way that it works. It's kind of ridiculous to demand a kid who wants to commit to you to totally shut down his commit or his recruitment more than a year ahead of schedule. I could see him, probably taking a visit to Florida State, probably taking a visit to Florida at some point. That's just kind of me speculating and what I think will probably end up happening. That's definitely not, known fact right now by any means, but he absolutely wants to stay in the state of Florida. That's something that's, really important to him. He wants to stay in the Florida area. I think that means that most likely FSU and UF will end up being the biggest threats to Miami down the line. But right now, Miami absolutely is the team to beat by a pretty considerable margin.
And hopefully we'll get to see him on the football field here this year really, really soon. All right, well, you're going to get tons of coverage from us through the weekend on a lot of these kids and the Broward Showcase. So make sure you tune into that at CaneSport.com. If you're not yet a subscriber to CaneSport, you see the information at the bottom of your screen. Your subscriptions allow us to do what we do every single day. So please, please, please head on over to CaneSport.com, become a subscriber, join our community of fans. So for Stephen Wagner and Luke Chaney, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you so much for joining us today for this look at Inside Canes Recruiting. We'll see you next time, everybody.